folks, so go ahead and jump back in.
No worries at all. We'd like to introduce our first speakers, Sheena Gladden and Ben Floyd, on their presentation. On to you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. So our topic is one person can make a culture change. So I'll let you pause to just read that saying there. If you change nothing, nothing will change. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce.
Sheena, are you sharing screen?
Ben is.
Okay.
Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Sheena Gladden. I started off in the old waterfall way and was able to see a company transform to move into Agile and Scrum. I started off as a Scrum Master, moved into an Agile coach, and then Enterprise Agile Transformation. Currently, I'm working towards my certified Scrum Trainer journey. Working through that and looking forward to submitting for next year to become a certified trainer. I'm going to introduce you to my co-host here, Ben Floyd.
Hi, I'm Ben Floyd. I started off many moons ago, more than I'll admit to. I started off as a product owner, and then I switched over to being a Scrum Master for the better part of a decade and became a coach. And at the beginning of this month, I became a certified Scrum trainer. And so I'm still on my journey of being a change maker myself. And Sheena and I are accountability partners for each other, and we help each other through this process. So today we're going to talk about being change makers. And let's see, Sheena, is this first one you or is this one me?
It's you.
Okay, so the information that we're pulling from is from the 14th Annual State of Agile Report and the 15th Annual State of Agile Report. This is the 14th Annual State of Agile Report was published in 2020, and the 15th Annual State of Agile Report was published in 2021. So that's where we're pulling our information. And after our talk, we'll drop those into the chat channel for you. So the number one issue that came out of the 2014 State of Agile report was the number one issue for Agile transformation was that organizations were resistant to change. And some of the examples that we have seen and read through were sort of the traditional models where they said, go and do that Agile thing. We'll send you off for 2 days of training and get that certification, become a product owner, become a Scrum Master. But the organization is still doing things the old-fashioned way. They want the Scrum teams to be Agile, but then they want you to continue with the organization itself doing things traditionally. I was giving an Agile leadership conference before the pandemic, leadership workshop, and I was going through the entire C-level leadership at this organization, and the CEO kept leaving during the middle of it. And the rest of the C-level team kept telling me, bring the CEO back in. The CEO needs to hear this. And the CEO literally said to me, I built this company, and what worked got us here for the last 20 years. Why should we change? And my question was, then why do you think you need Agile? Why do you think you want to try Kanban or Scrum? Some of the other things that we have seen along the way is when you see traditional hierarchy, especially with bosses, where they're looking for reporting metrics and they want to look at arbitrary deadlines and dates versus embracing the Agile values and mindsets. So that came from the 14th annual report. And I'm going to hand it back to Sheena now to talk about some of the findings in the 15th.
Yeah, so the 15th annual State of Agile report says that the culture clash is one of the top issues as well and challenges. So when we talk about culture clash, it could be something along the lines of, traditionally, management is the one either organizing and assigning the work, sometimes even telling the people that are doing the work how to go about doing it, versus that agile mindset of the team is self-managing. So there's clashes that occur during that. As well as, even just the work. A lot of times I've experienced it with some teams where they're working on something, but people are tapping them on the shoulder and like, hey, could you do this for me? And could you run this report for me and such? In an agile world, especially if you're working in Scrum and you committed to something in a particular sprint, sometimes that has to go into the backlog and it has to be prioritized. That's a clash and that's a conflict that most organizations aren't used to. It's a big change for them. So those are just some examples of culture clashes that organizations can experience.
So I'm going to tell you a quick story about a little company you may or may not heard of. In 2001, the Wall Street Journal reported that there was this company called Microsoft and its best earning days for revenue were behind it. And there was this guy running the company. His name was Bill Gates. And Bill Gates said, we will absolutely not be agile. Bill stepped down as CEO and he handed the reins over to a guy named Steve Ballmer. And he said, we will not be agile. But there was one team in the Visual Studio department in 2008 that decided to start experimenting with Scrum. Now, they got really good results. By 2010, 25 teams in the Visual Studio department started working with Scrum. Steve kept saying, we will still not be agile. What got us here from the 70s and 80s, we're going to keep doing. By 2014, the entire Visual Studio development department was running Agile and Scrum. And the department happened to be run by a gentleman named Satya Nadella. Now in 2014, what happened was Steve stepped down and Satya Nadella became the CEO. Within 1 month of becoming CEO, Satya told the world, Microsoft will now support an agile culture. We will support it from the top up instead of supporting it from a grassroots level. Forbes magazine came out and said Nadella's ascension to CEO in 2014 was directly related to the success of the Visual Studio department being agile. And then to further that, since he took over, Microsoft in 2019 had the largest market capitalization share. It had more than Amazon, Apple, or Facebook. And that is after Wall Street Journal said its best earning days were behind them back in 2001.
So I want to share with you actually something that I'm working with right now. So I have an organization where some parts of the organization has embraced the Agile and Scrum methodology, as well as even SAFe in some areas, but not all parts of the organization. So I'm working with the business right now, and the group that I'm working with is very traditional. And what we're in the process of doing is picking a software, a new platform for them to replace one of their old legacy systems. And so, of course, they're like, hey, we need to know what the cost is, who we need, and how long is this going to take, right? And so I'm working with them and I'm like, we don't even have a vendor picked out. So I try to do a different approach to them. I say, hey, I want to try something new. Just bear with me, let's just for a period of time, figure out the vendors that we want to evaluate, down select them, have some criteria to down select them, and then go through some vendor demos. And then let's just, because I'm going across 3 divisions within our organization, let's all evaluate them and then just pick the vendor. That's it. We're not going to go through anything more. That's our small little piece of work that we're going to do. So it was a challenge. They were like, what? Like, wait, no, we have to figure it all out. It's like, no. Right now, we have a lot of unknowns. Let's just do this one area. Gave a time boxed it. They were like, okay. skeptical, but we went through it. We actually just completed it, and we were lucky enough that all the divisions agreed on the same vendor. And so we said, okay, what's next? It's like, okay, let's just work with the vendor now. Just each division has to figure out how we're going to roll this out together. So tell me what your implementation is going to look like. What does that rollout look like? Because that also adds to the cost. And then we'll work with the vendor to figure out the cost. And for the next quarter, we're just going to figure out the small piece of scoping we're going to do for the first rollout and what it's going to add up to get going with the vendor. So they're like, okay. And then the next phase is going to be, we're going to work with the vendor then. And then we're going to configure the software, and then we'll work on, testing and rolling it out during that first phase. So I slowly have tried to adjust them in a different culture, a different way of doing things. I didn't use the words Agile. I didn't use the word Scrum. I slowly just introduced a new idea to them. So that's something that we're going through right now, just to try to make a change without it being so drastic, and teaching them to do it in smaller pieces. One of the other areas that I'm trying to work with them right now on is the actual implementation. So they're used to a particular site goes live or everybody goes live at once, right? And I had to teach them. So we have a fabrics department, and I try to break down a little bit. Could we do like a small business unit? Could we just roll out so that we can really see, do we release the right thing? Do we have gaps? Do we need to fix it? And then thinking about change management, right? If it doesn't work well, then we're going to have people that are not going to be happy with the software. So let's do a small group of people first, get their buy-in, let them be cheerleaders for us for the next part of the organization that's going to take it. They're like, yeah, that's not going to work. Our business is all interact and such. So I asked them, I said, so in my fabrics area, we have footwear, gloves, and accessories. Could we just take the gloves department, right? And within gloves, if there's an issue, we enter it into this new system. If it's footwear and accessories, it still goes into the old system. So we just do gloves, it's contained. They're like, okay, yeah, maybe we could, yeah, okay, I could see that. But they're not used to that, right? So introducing these ideas to them a little bit at a time, because sometimes they're just used to the old ways that they've done it, and they don't really know how to think differently. So that's just an experience. So just, me, my little self here, being able to try to influence in a way and help them think differently and to be able to change their mindset. Ben?
Real quick to wrap up, just to give you a quick example of something that I did is the last organization I was at, it was very much I was the coach. They wanted me to implement Scrum, but the management executive team kept wanting to do things in a traditional way. I stood on a soapbox for 2.5 years, trying to convince the executive team to form up as a Scrum team and what they could do with their executive powers to help change the culture and give us the resources we needed at the team level. After 2.5 years just to shut me up, they finally experimented and tried. But it took 2.5 years of perseverance before they finally tried. And then we made some big differences. So it can be done. It does take perseverance is my message to you. And a couple of resources to consider as we wrap this up is I encourage you to read Turn the Ship Around, because that book is an excellent book. If it can be done in the US Navy and on board a US naval submarine, agile mindsets and beliefs can be brought into anywhere.
And the book Switch is a really helpful tool. It helps you be able to implement change. And therefore it talks about your rational side and your emotional side and how to help people make that switch, make that change. It's a really good resource. It has short stories to show you examples of how they went about it.
So just to wrap up, if you change nothing, expect nothing to change. So be the change maker. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sheena and Ben. That was really good. Prabhat, do you have your presentation ready?
Yep, I do have that. I just want to share the screen for that matter, right? And I will kick it off.
Yeah, Fernando, do we have any time for Q&A for the last one or not?
We are over 40 minutes. So
Okay, all right, cool, thanks. It's on you, Pravat, thank you.
Well, Sunny, Pravat, one of the same thing. Ken, no problem. 1 second, please. I'm trying to figure out to share the screen now. Are you able to see my screen now?
No.
no,
No? Sorry about that. How about now?
no.
Nothing?
Yep.
Sorry.
But if you need to email it to me or something, I mean, you know.
Yeah,
let's-
I can email you straight away. Right. So 1 second. Sorry about that. Sorry about the delay. There you go. Just sent you one. I sent you the email, Cam. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for it to come through, so.
No problem. I'm using my different laptop for tonight, and I was kind of wondering I'll be able to kind of go ahead and share all those details, but unfortunately, it's kind of like asking for different permissions. Sorry about that.
Where are my downloads? Downloads. SVK. Just give me a heads up when you need me to change screens for you.
Sure. I will anyway start, right? So you got the presentation there, right? So first thing first, I want to go ahead and compliment the first session in terms of changes. So changes are permanent in nature, and permanency is the impermanent part of the world, right? So having said that, when you try to adopt different methodologies and different concepts within yourself, within your personal life, or probably in your, in a company as well, in your organization as well, it's kind of hard for people to adopt it or get adapted to it, right? So once you start talking about those methodologies, and once you start talking about those processes, right, you get confused with the different concepts or different methodologies. And that's what my topic is for tonight. Scrum versus Kanban, and people get confused about that, so on and so forth. But this kind of this presentation that I'm sharing with everyone right now is inspired by a video which was available on YouTube. And I went through that video, and it kind of like cleared a lot of concept for me, a lot of doubts for me in terms of how should we differentiate between Scrum and Kanban. Can you move on to the second slide, please? So Right. So Scrum and Kanban are best known methodologies. Everyone knows about it for agile software development, right? So let's break that down, right? This slide basically talks about software development, how it looks like. You can see product owner decides what to build, development team builds it, and customers get value out of it, or probably I would say get benefited or a value being delivered to them, right? So the customers then provide feedback and is fed into the process, right? So if we can look into that, there's a whole big cycle wherein the development team is working in terms of developing that product, and that goes to the customers. Customers then kind of talk about that and move back to the stakeholders, or probably to the product owner as well in terms of the feedback, right? There's a very good book written in terms of feedback, and I'm kind of reading that book at the moment, and that was suggested in our last lean or probably our agile conversation that we had last month, right? So it's a PO's responsibility over here to take input from the customer, right? And from there, the stakeholders then organize and prioritize the features and user stories, or probably epics, or whatever that is, right? And this is then known as a product backlog, right? As you can see, the product owners maintain the product backlog there, right? Now, what happens is, right, between the product backlog and customer is what distinguishes the major difference between Scrum and Kanban, right? I would just wanted to emphasize that on that. And each has its own routine and discipline, right? So the roles are different. So what I would say in Scrum, the role would be called as Scrum Master. And in Agile, it would be called as an Agile coach, right? For Kanban, beg your pardon, right? So can we move on to slide 3, please? So this is a very important slide that I wanted to talk about, and that actually differentiates between Scrum and Kanban, right? It is common in both, and it's called as pull system, as you can see on the screen. So for everybody's understanding, I just want to kind of like keep it very simple. And so the pull system actually ensures that the work from product backlog gets to the customer in the very shortest way, right? So the very shortest way would be in Scrum, it would be via 2 weeks of sprint, or probably 4 weeks of sprint, or something like that. But in Kanban, it would be a repeated cycle. It would be a continuous cycle, right? So this system also helps in uncovering bottlenecks in the process. So bottlenecks could be dependencies, or could be bureaucracy or red tapeism in terms of documentation, and so on and so forth. And also you will see after this slide that Scrum and Kanban use pull system in 2 different ways, right? So can you move on to, yep. So there are sprints, right? As you can see, I'm just trying to explain everybody, and I'm sure everybody is kind of aware about Scrum ceremonies, or we call it routines, or disciplines, right? We got the product backlog on the left-hand side. We got the Scrum board, right? To do, build, test, done, right? Wherein any kind of high priority item would be pulled out of the product backlog, and it would be converted into, or probably pulled into, a sprint backlog. And sprint backlog is basically maintained by the developers, right? So they will be kind of going ahead and pulling it on the basis of priority during the sprint planning. And that's how it's actually being delivered, or probably worked upon, until the state is done, right? So having said that, there is a kind of like 2 weeks. It's a kind of like cycle of 2 weeks, or a periodic cycle wherein the sprint is conducted, right? Every now and then, right? However, Kanban does it in a different way. There is no 2 weeks of sprint, right? And is a continuous process. There is no sprint backlog there, right? However, there is still a product backlog, right? Which is actually defining the priority of it. The pull system in Kanban actually works in a different way via work in progress limits. So what I mean by that is it depends upon the capacity as well. Again, capacity matters in both the methodologies. But over here, it would be just like a continuous process wherein, let's say in build, test, or done, something is already done in build. So, and that has been moved to test. So they will figure out something from the product backlog, which is high priority again, and they will pull it back, pull it forward to build, and they'll start working on that. And that cycle keeps on repeating. So each column in the Kanban has a work in progress limit depending upon the capacity, right? And the pull system here, when the items are actually moved from one column to another, so I mean column from build, test, or they could be different Kanban structure altogether, right? So can get pulled into the previous column depending upon the priority, as I mentioned earlier. And this is pretty much the pull system that I wanted to kind of like put emphasis on and actually explain to everyone. So the task in Kanban rituals daily, there will be different rituals in Kanban. So probably something very standard from sprint, from Scrum framework or Scrum methodology, which would be daily stand-up, or which would be demos or stakeholders, stakeholder demonstration or retrospective, something of that sort. Moving on to the last slide over here, right? So, yeah, just wanted to call that out, sorry. This is not actually very prescriptive, as I mentioned earlier. So neither of the methodologies are prescriptive. However, high-performing teams would determine what works for them and would flex the system accordingly, right? So if you can just hit the another button, you will have that. Yep, there you go. So yeah, they would flex the system and they will use it accordingly. There would be different concept of estimation. We will be using different methodologies over there, which I've not covered, but it depends upon the team how they actually want to go ahead and measure their performance or their capacity. So that's pretty much from my presentation and talk, and I hope that everybody liked it, and this is the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pramod. That was really good. Up next is we have Fee with his presentation.
Nimita, do we have time for some Q&A?
Oh, do we have time for Q&A, Fernando?
We actually have 4 minutes because it ended 1 minute early.
Well, I finished up within a good bit of time, right?
Yes.
Do we have any questions, Prabhat?
Well, I had a question. I was wondering, when you talk about detecting bottlenecks, if you had example of bottlenecks that were solved?
Bottlenecks for me would be some kind of long-lasting processes which will actually stop that communication or that process of delivering that product to the customer in the shortest while, right? So for example, there has to be a lot of documentation done, right? There has to be releases done, and then they go back to probably some kind of software, which is CMDB software, let's say, for example, right? Which would require a lot of documentation, and probably that would slow down the process of implementing those releases. I'm just giving you an example. That could be 1 or 2 odd examples that I've experienced so far, right? That could be bottlenecks, right? But I just want to make sure that if it makes sense to you.
Mhm.
Yeah, so there could be several examples depending upon the scenarios or depending upon the organizations and the structure that they have, because it is highly merged with the ITSM system as well. At the same time, ITSM framework, I mean to say, wherein there's a ticketing system and there are changes, approvals required for that matter. So it depends from automation to manual work as well sometimes.
Val, what have you done to identify those bottlenecks, or how can you see them?
Ken, that's a great question, and I'm taking you back to Prudential for that matter, right? Our previous organization, right? So we identified that, and wherein there was a whole long process wherein there was a release guardrail versus the sprint structure, right? And the sprint structure has to actually align with very much release guardrail. However, they should work together, right? And they were kind of in a conflict wherein they were not able to talk to each other. And because of that, there were so many changes, or I would say releases, which were missed or which were probably pushed down the line just because they are not meeting the timeline, or probably they're not catching up in terms of the guardrails that they have. So there was only one thing that I observed as far as the improvement is concerned, which was something related to improving on the approval process, which actually we eradicated from the whole release process, and this was got completely automated. So that was actually completely then aligned with the sprint process, and a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tapeism was actually removed from there, which actually made a little bit smoother, but there were still big hurdles over there, like in terms of meeting. So I'm not sure whether I answered correctly, but this was something that we realized at that point in time that approvals were taking a lot of time in terms of getting those releases in place.
Are we doing on time for now?
Cool.
We are on time.
Cool.
Okay, should I go?
Yes, please. Thank you so much.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen? Let me make this slideshow. Okay, I don't know how to get rid of this, but okay. Yep, so that's very interesting presentation earlier, and hopefully by the end of my presentation, I will answer some of those questions from Ken about how do we see the bottlenecks, or how well we're doing with the release, right? So my talk is about the DevOps metrics. So when we talk about DevOps metrics, it's mainly we're talking about how effective an organization deal with DevOps. The 4 keys that any organization interested in about is first, how frequently we release a piece of software into production, the lead time for changes. So this is a time when engineer or developers say that, okay, they're done with their work, and then they create a pull request to merge the changes into the release at the release branch. And then, it's the changes go through a whole bunch of quality gate. And at the end of that quality gate is kept released into production, right? So we measure that time. Another interesting metric is the release failure rate, right? So we release something into production, and then for sure, we human, and then somebody make mistakes. So we realize that there's a failure. So how do we measure that failure? So we identify that failure by either we roll back that chances or we create a new hotfix to fix that thing that just broke, right? Another interesting metric is the time to restore service after that failures, right? So how long did it take to recover from that failure? So those are the four important keys of DevOps metrics. There's some other less talk about, but as important as those four metrics. So we call defect escape rate. So during a sprint, you deploy 40 releases into production, and what are percentage of the failures, right? And then the mean time to detect the failure. Yeah, so there's a failure. So how soon you detect that there's a failure in production that you just release that code. And of course, in order to measure how well you're doing, another metric is like the percentage of coverage by our automation tests, right? And app availabilities. This is more in the SDR land where you continue monitoring your software in production with the app availabilities and application usage and traffics. You know how frequently is that user access the application. Okay. For Merpipe, this is what we have so far. We release very frequently. So during a sprint, we can have like 40, releases in our 2-week sprint. We measure the lead time for changes. We measure the release failure rate. We do measure the mean time to restore service, defect escape rates, mean time to detect issues. And then we do have the metrics for code coverage. The only two things that we currently don't have is the app availabilities and the application usage and traffics. We're working on that. Last but not least is we also measure the time we release a software into production. This doesn't track under any metric, but it helps the lead time for changes, right? So how do we do that? We're collecting, we have a progress table, and then all of our metrics that we're collecting is embedded into our pipelines, right? So these are the metrics that we collected as part of the pipeline, and I will show the pipeline in a minute. And these metrics, this data get saved into progress table. And then we use, for visualization, we use a tool that developed by Shopify. It's called Smashing. It's built on top of Ruby. It's very nice tool. It took me like 1 or 2 days to get this thing working for various dashboard that we have here. So let me quickly show the one of the dashboard that we have for visualization. So this is one of the things. This is showing the current metrics for the current sprint. I can we started the sprint on Tuesday. So today, so it's about a week. So we did 16 releases into production. And those 16 releases is against 14 Jira tickets. There's no failures. The end-to-end tests are still only 18 test cases, and the percentage is 20.79. So we just started the automation test about 2 months ago. And this is the lead time for changes that we measure. And let me do another metric. So also have a history of the sprint. So at any point in time, if I go back into like earlier sprint, I can, so this is sprint 43. Currently we are on sprint 47. Right, so show the Jira tickets here, number of release. So this is a little bit less, but I think sprint 44 where we did a lot. Yeah, we have 41 releases and 30 tickets, right? This, yeah. And also we have another interesting dashboard. It's called bugs info dashboard. So this is showing all of the bugs that we're currently working on and the history of the bugs that we work on. So this is not like for our DevOps people, but like more out for our customer success team. When they got a call from our customer, they can always relate it to this board, and then they can search on this board and then see what is the error or the bugs talk about, and then the resolution, so that they can have like a pretty much idea what's going on with that particular customer. Okay, so let me go back to this. I'm going to show the pipeline that we have. Oh, it's here. All right, so this is one particular pipeline. In my previous talk, I also showed this before. But what happened is on this pipeline, along this pipelines, is have this interesting thing for collecting the metrics. So this is the release metric. So so this when this build job is invoked, it will insert data into our Postgres table, and that's how we use it to show on this DevOps metrics. Yeah, so everything's automated, right? So I don't have to do anything at part with the sprint. It's just like naturally, if something fail, oh, I forgot to show one thing, one sprint that we have something fail. Right, so this particular sprint, they have one fail release, and this is the time recovery is about less than 4 hours. Yep. So that's what I have. So about Merpipe, Merpipe is a startup company, and we are the very first company that doing what we call it's automated the multivariant test for creatives for Facebook ad and Instagram ads. About me, I'm an engineer manager focused on DevOps. Okay, so that's all I have. Any questions?
So yeah, anyone can ask me a question?
I have a question. I think that to be agile in DevOps is even more challenging. And I see that you have 2-week sprints. So how do you compensate for the unplanned work? Because DevOps and SecOps and DevSecOps, all these like non-product development related teams, they have a lot of these things that just come their way, and something incident happens and something breaks, and they have to attend to it. And oftentimes DevOps and SecOps, they use Kanban, not like the product development, like the sprints. So how do you compensate for those unplanned work? That's one question. And two is, have you tried to use like a metrics applications like either EasyBI or Tableau, where it really measures the time of where the tickets are stalling? For example, if there's a lot of tickets that gets accumulated in QA. And you know that's the bottleneck. You know what I mean? And also you can just look at the graph and see where the bottleneck comes from, you know?
Correct.
So yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So,
Right. So let me address the first question.
And stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me address the first question. Yes. So for the unplanning works, it's for development, for like real development works. So we only have like 75% of the when we do planning, we only have like 75% of the velocity for the team. The other 25% is so that we can encounter for, you know, hot fix and bugs and stuff like that. For DevOps stuff, I have my old team, and we are on the Kanban, right? Even though we're on Kanban more, but we also try to align our stuff with the sprint, the development sprint. And it's worked well, very well, just because we have like a small team. Yeah. So the other question that we have, so one of the metric that I showed earlier is the lead time is exactly what you're talking about. That's the time that when we the Jira ticket being worked on until the work get deployed to production, right? So I know that those Tableaus and IBS tool will give a nicer look and feel, but we are still a small shop with a limited budget, so we cannot have like a luxury of doing you know, budgets like those nice tool. So that's why you know, we just like come up with you know, using open source tool and then spend our development on to develop those tool.
Fair enough. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Everything that you say makes sense. So, but I think that even just from Jira tickets, you should be able to tell the
Correct.
quick bottlenecks. You know what I mean? So yeah. I think using this AWS and all these things, I think it's even more useful. Like, you know, looking at the releases and how long it takes and all that. You know, but I think the graph actually tells a lot of stories, and I think you'll be able to tell some of those bottlenecks from there as well. Yeah,
with the metric that I have, I can very well create a nice looking graph on the same dashboard. So the key thing is that you have a one place to look for everything, every metric that you want, versus like, hey, I'm this type metric, I want to go to the other one and then go to another tool to look at another. It's hard, right?
I know. My hats off to you, because I think DevOps and SecOps, I mean, again, it's a lot more challenging to be agile and to be what I always refer to as like oil in an engine, right? To be agile.
Correct. Yes.
Know? Agile is the oil, and the engine is like.
Sorry to cut you off, and Samantha. We have to move on to the next presenter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fee. It was an awesome presentation. Anaga, if I pronounced that name correctly, could we see your presentation?
Yes, you did. So let me share my screen. Can you see the screen? Awesome. Yes. Awesome. So welcome to Princeton Agility Lightning Talks presentation. I'm Anagate, and I'm going to speak about personal accountability, lessons from mountaineering. And before I introduce myself, I want to thank Princeton Agility organizers for the opportunity to speak here and for organizing this session. So this is me. I have done mountaineering for about 11 years, and I will more say like I grew up in mountains and mountaineering environment. And I'm also certified somatic therapist. And one thing that's not known enough about somatic therapists is I also do movement therapy. So I'm a movement therapist. I work with awareness to improve alignment and reduce tension in the body and pain to have a happier life. I am certified executive coach, and I have 2 masters in electrical and computer engineering and in physics. So I'm going to take you on a journey of mountain climbing in short 10 minutes. And before we start journey, I'm going to touch base on leadership roles that I have learned from my experience in mountaineering and other places. So for me, leadership has 3 roles. One is facilitator, one is manager, and one is coach and accountability. So I'm going to talk about coach and one role of coach, that is accountability. So coming back to this picture, this is taken somewhere around 6,000 to 8,000 feet in the Himalayas. And this is the load that we carried every single day for 6 to 7 days before we saw snow-capped mountains and snow-capped peaks. And you can see that it's about 40 pounds of load, and you can see some equipment in there. There is rope on the top. There is white roll. You can see that white roll is something we put under our sleeping bag, a mattress, sleeping bag for insulin, and other equipment that's inside that rucksack, you will be able to see as we move forward. So we started this journey at around 4,000 feet. And in Himalayas, there is quite a bit of approach march before you can actually see snow and ice. So we walk from 4,000 feet to about 16,000 feet, carrying load like this. So this is my another picture of ice climbing. And you can see that this is a vertical ice wall. This is me. There is my instructor or coach up here. Both of us are roped up for our own safety. So you see my rope over here, and you can see rope of my instructor at the top. And if you see here, I have lots of gears on me. So I have in my hands, I have ice axe, I have ice hammer. I have a helmet in case if I fall down. I have harness that's hard to see, but if you see, look at my shoes, they are special shoes. They have spikes underneath to walk on ice, because ice is very slippery and you cannot just walk on ice without having something that goes inside and holds you there. But what's interesting in my picture is if you see both of my feet are out in the air, and what I'm standing on are 2 spikes on front of my shoes that I kick in the ice, and I'm standing literally on 4 spikes in front of my shoes. And this is all gear that I'm carrying in my rucksack in the previous picture. This is a picture taken somewhere around 16,000 feet. And this was our daily routine. So either we walk for about 6 hours every day morning to get to the next place, or we spend around 6 hours learning technical skills like this one. And this is another picture of mine. And this is a crevasse crossing. So you can see me crossing crevasse and there is a ladder and I'm walking on the ladder. You can see rope in front of me. That's my safety rope in case I fall down. They want to have some way of stopping me from falling and pulling me out. The ladder is also roped up and I have big shoes with those crampons. And this can be very intimidating. The reason it's not becoming intimidating because we are learning where to put our feet. Why there is no anxiety and more comfort because we know where to put our feet. And this is also around 15,000, 16,000 feet. So what it has to do with accountability. So when we have spent our whole day, like about 6 hours in the morning, doing exertion, like carrying 40 pounds on our back or climbing and learning technical skills, it's very exhausting. And when we come back, so this is the picture of our base camp. This is at 11,000 feet. And this is the first view we saw of Himalayas when we were mountaineering. You can see tents in that picture. And after we have spent about 6-7 hours doing things like walking with weight or technical climbing, the most luxurious and comfortable thing is get in your tent and get in your warm sleeping bag. And it feels amazingly good, but at the same time, it can be very harmful that we experience. Because once you get in the sleeping bag, it's very hard to get out. Even when you're exhausted, even when you're hungry, it's hard to get out for dinner. And if you don't get out for dinner in time, food gets cold really fast. And if your coach or instructor doesn't see you in the line, then they come and drag you out of your sleeping bag and your tent and say, oh, you need to eat. By that time, the food is cold and you are mad and upset because you were comfortable and cozy in your sleeping bag and you have to get out to eat. And because food is cold, first you don't have appetite because you were sleeping and the food was cold. So it's harder to eat. And then next day, it becomes a drag to eat, to do next day activity. And that's where I learned my lesson that if you want to eat hot food and perform next day, it's your accountability. You have to be your own coach to figure out a way to take care of yourself. And what I started doing is when we used to go out for our hot tea and lecture afterwards, I used to take my mess tin and everything with me. And we used to just sit where the food was going to be served for about half an hour. And as soon as food came out, we used to run and eat hot food and everyone used to be encouraging, oh, you are such good kids because you are here to eat hot food. And we were ready to go in our sleeping bag by the time when others were getting dragged out of it so that they can eat. And when it comes to coaching, I mean, there can be really good leadership. There can be a lot of resources. We had good instructors, coaches, we had food, but it was still our responsibility to pick up ourselves, pick up our feet, put them in front of one another and get to the food to take care of ourselves. And I think that's where the accountability and learning to be your own coach comes for me. So it's every step you take is your accountability, and this is something you can learn by yourself. And I'm very passionate about this topic. So this is my information and I would love to connect with you. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Annika. As a fellow hiker, I found your presentation very interesting. So thank you so much.
Sorry, can you say that again? I couldn't hear you.
No, I said, as a fellow hiker, I found your presentation very, very interesting. A lot of good takeaways.
Thank you.
Andrea, are you ready for your presentation?
Yes, I am. Let me share my screen. Because we have so one more presentation after me, so we have to make sure we have enough time to do it. Let me, yes, go into the presentation mode and find a way to share the right screen. So my talk tonight, can you see my screen, by the way, at this point? Yes, thank you. So my talk tonight is a book review of a book called Thanks for the Feedback. So Prabha, I really wonder if it's a book you heard in a previous Princeton Agility meeting, because it's where I got the idea.
Exactly, you're right.
Yes, so to step back a little bit, and I'm trying to see, yes, why I'm talking from this book is that back in April, Princeton Agility had Ronika Roth talking to us during the whole evening about modeling change through everyday practice. And she really put an emphasis on pausing and evaluating oneself. She had the example of talking too much in meetings. So she thought she had the best idea, so she was talking a lot until she realized that she could stop talking and maybe others would have time to give their idea. And when she stopped, she discovered that other people had indeed good ideas, sometimes even better ideas than she had. So that I am totally guilty of that behavior, and that made me think about how many other things I could improve on. So during further discussion in the evening, the book Thanks for the Feedback came in, and I decided to have a look. As a disclaimer, the book has 300 pages. It has a lot of content. I'm not going to tell you all about it tonight. It's way too much. So here are just a couple of highlights. The main idea is that feedback is everywhere. It's not just during your yearly annual review with your manager. A lot of attention is about giving feedback, providing feedback in a way that it can be received. And there is very little training about receiving feedback. And the whole idea, to come back to Anaga's talk about accountability, is not to wait until the perfect coach or feedback giver comes to you. You have to take it into your hand to learn to retrieve useful information from any feedback you get, however poorly delivered it is. So there are 3 pitfalls of feedback. I have to step back. A truth pitfall, that is, the feedback is just plain wrong. We don't want to hear about it. There is a relationship pitfall, because we don't acknowledge the person who is giving the feedback, and the problem is evidently you, not me. And last, there is identity feedback, because the feedback threatens who I am. You are probably aware of fixed identity versus growth identity, and there are also other stuff we can be aware of. So there are 3 types of feedback, and they are all called feedback. There is appreciation, a pat in your back, the idea that your work is being seen and appreciated. There is coaching, when somebody explains you how to get to the next level. And then there is evaluation, when it's a clear-cut measurement on how well you are doing, like the dashboard Phil was presenting earlier. And if you are being evaluated, it could be also how many goals you are achieving for your pay increase, or yes, how many sales quota you got. So it's a very clear-cut measurement. the evaluation type of feedback will be overshadowing any other coaching or appreciation that might be received during the same time. So we have to be very mindful of that. And depending on the situation, the type of feedback we want to hear will vary. So for example, the book has an example of a writer asking feedback from an established writer. If the writer requesting feedback is just very new, maybe the only really ask is only to get appreciation, like a pat in the back and say, good work, keep working on it, you will succeed. But an advanced writer may not be happy with that type of feedback, and they may want a more detailed explanation on what is wrong and how they can get to the next level. So it's really a case-by-case basis on what feedback is useful for a specific person in a specific circumstance. And you have to know what you want, what you need, what you are being offered, and get aligned. Second pitfall is the truth. Many times you get a feedback and it's just plain wrong. You don't understand why the person tells you that you are bossy, or you are too active in meeting, or you are not listening. So the first reaction is to ask, tell me more. Also, many times the feedback comes from labels, not data. So you will be said, oh, you are too overbearing, you are bossy, and you have to understand where the feedback comes from. The book here at one point has an example of a special educator who has long hair, some shady, I guess, teeth, and his manager tells him to straighten up. No more explanation. So the special educator who didn't want to cut his hair asked, where the feedback was coming from. And it was about the family he was working with. They appreciated the work the educator was doing, but they were saying that had a long time getting used to the educator because of his special look and his special look. So then the educator said, well, please just add one line to my bio when you talk to prospective families. Can you tell them that I am a semi-professional bluegrass singer? And this additional piece of information changed the whole story, because now the family were intrigued by this artistical bent, and they were not seeing the special educator as a strange-looking person, rather than an artist who was daring to be his own self. And when you are a special educator, you deal with people who are not in the box either. So he could be a very valid example of somebody who could not be in the box and still strive in society. So that's why it really pays off to ask what's behind the feedback you received. And then there are the blind spots. The feedback is wrong because it cannot be possibly correct. So we have to remember that we don't see ourselves as others see ourselves. We don't see our facial expression. We don't hear our voice the same way other people hear us, and I will listen to this recording in a few hours. We judge ourselves by situation. Other people judge ourselves by character. So people may think that I'm selfish and overbearing, and I will think that I'm just stepping in because no one wanted to do the work. Also, we judge ourselves on attention, and other people will judge ourselves on our impact on others. So I can see that I am generous and coaching and trying to get other people up to speed, and other people will just see me as very annoying because I'm just interrupting them and I just give my feedback when they are interfering all the time. So what can you do for that? We can seek honest mirror, so people we trust and who will be willing to share the truth about behavior we don't see. And we can also ask others, how am I getting in my own way? Then there is a relationship type of issues where we don't really, the person who is giving feedback is getting in the way. And one thing that I was not aware of and need to pay more attention is the switch tracking. So it's pretty much when somebody gives you a feedback, you reply with another feedback, and there are two topics being discussed, and there is no conversation. So one thing that can really happen in my company or where I worked in the past is when the product line manager tells the development team that they are always late. And the development team will reply that they are late because the product manager keeps changing the release content. So we have two very valid feedback and both need to be addressed, but they can, you have to take them separately or you have to handle them, acknowledge them as two different points and handle them individually. And then among the identity pitfalls, there is the temperament. So we have to acknowledge that, first of all, bad feedback is stronger than the good feedback. And that's how human beings are built. You can have a perfect day, something bad happens, you will remember the bad. And then there is the baseline. So we are all different. And some of us are, I guess, more optimistic or more pessimistic as regularly. We can be more or less sensitive to feedback. And when we get jolted out of our comfort zone, it can take more or less time to go back to our baseline. So we have to understand where we are. I think I'm more on the sensitive side, so you may think that I'm overreacting. When I see my colleagues, I feel sometimes that they are very hard to move. I suppose that somebody who is more on the stable side may want to have some amplifier on feedback to realize that, hey, they have been given feedback, they need to act on it. So that's all for the short summary of the book. There are many, many more ideas and stories. There is a lot to learn. I hope that this presentation gave you some inspiration to listen for feedback, take time to get detail about what you hear, and dare to grow.
Thank you, Andrea. That was really informative. Does anyone have a quick 30-second question? Okay, on to Steve for our final presentation of the night.
Maybe I should come off mute because, you know, I have a hard time doing that, especially with double mute. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. I'm going to do something a little bit different. And Kenneth, if you can, you know, spotlight me by clicking on the three ellipses and just spotlight me. I'm just going to use my camera. And if not, if everybody could just flip me over to, you know, speaker view, and we'll just go through it from there. So today I'm going to talk about Agile mindset. And Agile mindset is a very important topic for me. One of the things I've discovered is many organizations struggle with simply a definition of agility and what is Agile. So it doesn't matter what we're doing if we can't even agree on that. And one of the things I love about coaches, I've been a coach for about a decade, is if you ask one coach a question, you get one answer. And if you ask two coaches a question, you're probably going to get 4 answers. And if you ask 3 coaches a question, you're probably going to get 9 answers. And that's just how it goes. So I'm going to go through the very basics here. We're going to talk about what is agility, what is a mindset, and then what is an Agile mindset and how we can adjust that through language that we can all use and things that we might say and do. So the first thing is, you know, the definition of a mindset. And the Merriam-Webster dictionary is very clear. It's a person's way of thinking and their opinions. And that's a nice one, but I prefer the definition from the Cambridge dictionary, which says it is it's a mental attitude or people's perception and inclinations and how they respond to things. And I like this one a lot better because it is, you know, our mindset shapes the way that we view the world. It is within ourselves. So, you know, a typical mindset that we often hear about is the glass half full, glass half empty. Most of us have heard something about that. And what it really means is multiple people can look at the same glass. It can have the same amount of water or wine or whatever you like to put in your glass. And some people can focus on what's not there. Oh, it's empty. It's half empty. I wish there was the rest of it there. Where did it go? And others can look at it. Wow, look at all that wine we have. Look at all that water we have. This is wonderful. This is a good thing. And this is simply, you know, the situation does not change. The glass still has the exact same amount, but it's really up to the individual and their mindset on how they feel about what is in the glass. And one of the things that's worth pointing out about mindset is mindsets change. The mindset I have today, the mindset I had this morning may not be the mindset I have later in the afternoon. And we can evolve our mindset throughout the day, throughout our lives, through weeks, for various things can affect and impact our mindset. Now let's talk about agility. And this is really something that I've struggled with many organizations, is what is the simple definition of agility? And I think it's its most basic roots. Agility is really our ability to respond to change. And if you look at this image, here is this beautiful young lady, and she is kicking a soccer ball, and everybody around her needs to respond to the change in the soccer ball. And their goal is to respond to that quickly and smoothly. And the smoother they do it, the more agile we would consider them. Now, I also like to add to this definition that it is our ability to respond to change, but also while continuing to provide value. Because in business, we want to provide value. We want to provide value for our customers, our stakeholders, everybody. And this guy here in this image, he's falling. And that is a very drastic change. That is a very drastic response to the change in the world, but it's not providing value. His teammates are not going to find value in that. The fans aren't going to provide value in that. The people that paid for tickets, not going to be happy with that. So we have to think about that. So that is a typical definition of agility. And now if you think about Agile, and Agile is really just focused on providing the most value for customers. That's it. How can we provide the most value for our customers? That's what we want to identify. Now, some people like Bob Schatz, he likes to add things, by causing no harm. And he means, don't harm the people doing the work, make sure we're not beating them up and they can maintain it. But we do want to provide the most value for our customers in a long-term sustainable way. And that's really as simple as it gets. Now, I don't know, I'm sure most of you probably have heard of Alistair Cockburn or know Alistair Cockburn or seen him speak, but he was one of the original signatories of the Agile Manifesto, and he's a brilliant speaker, and he's been focusing lately on the heart of Agile, really trying to get to those the very root of agility and what they were really trying to focus on. And it comes right down to it. Agile is just an attitude. It's just a way that we look at things and a way that we look at the world. We don't think, is that agile or is this agile? What we think, what we should be focusing on is, how can we work in an agile way? How can we apply agility here? How can we become more agile in the way that we're doing things and provide more value? It's really quite simple. Now, Carol Dweck wrote this amazing book, Mindset. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Even if you don't have time to read it, go do a search for Carol Dweck on YouTube. Watch a couple of her videos. They're probably 15, 20 minutes. She's charming and she's brilliant. And she identified two mindsets. These are very common mindsets, the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And the fixed mindset is the belief that, you're born with certain skills. You got certain skills or you don't. That's pretty much the end of it. And there's not a whole lot of point in working on skills that you don't already have, because you're never going to be great at it. So why bother? Now, but the growth mindset is slightly different. And it's the concept of, we can learn to do anything. We can practice, we can learn new skills. She worked on a study in schools where they simply spoke to, I think it was elementary school children. And if they didn't do well, what happened was, or if they did do well, they told them, you did well because you worked hard, or you didn't do well because you didn't work hard. And focus on the fact that they could change that. And they took another group, and if they did well, oh, you did well because you're smart. And the group, you didn't do well because, well, you're not smart. And guess what happened? The group that they were always telling, if you worked harder, you can learn, always improved. And the other group, didn't even matter how smart they were, they stayed the same. So simply language and speaking the language to these students made a major impact. Now, when we think about what is an agile mindset, let's go back to the thought of Agile is about providing more value to our customers, probably sooner. And while it is a subset of a growth mindset, it extends that and focuses on providing value. Now, Simon Sinek wrote this amazing book, and I've listened to the book, I've read the book, I've listened to the Audible, and I don't believe he mentions Agile in any way, but he's talking about the infinite game. And in the infinite game, it's never ending. He's talking about how we always have to learn, how once we achieve one thing, we can always get better, and we need to achieve something else because the game is constantly in play. And this is really how I see an agile mindset. Now let's talk about some language that we often hear, and I may get beat up for this, I often do. Some of the comments around language is one of the things we often hear from a fixed mindset, as we hear, I'm not good at this, we're not good at this, we can't do that. And that's the end of the discussion. And it's very, very limited. It's very boxed. There is no further way to go. There is no journey. We often hear Agile is a journey. This ain't about taking a journey when we talk this way. And one of my favorites is, this is how we do it. We're talking about changing. We're talking about transformation. And now you're telling me, well, this is how we do it. End of discussion. And we hear different versions of that. We hear, well, what we do is, or the way that so-and-so used to do it. That's all great. But maybe we need to extend on that. And this is one that I always get beat up on. Is I'm an Agile coach, been in a lot of organizations. You have the conversation with new teams, new leadership. Oh no, we are Agile. We don't need any help. We are Agile, or we took this course to be Agile. That is Agile. That is not Agile. And it's all very fixed, very conclusive, and almost always wrong. So now when we think about a growth mindset, the growth mindset is changed slightly different. I'm not good at this yet. We don't know how to do this yet. And that shows that they're thinking, well, we may not be good at it now, but we can be in the future. So we can expand and explore. And, another one is we can do this if. So I love it when teams say, you know what, we can't do this right now under these conditions, but if these conditions change, maybe we get this training, maybe this takes off our plate, we can do it. And that's showing that they're thinking, they're using their big brands that we hired them for. This is what we want. And we can always be more agile. So whenever I work with a team, it doesn't matter how much coaching they've had, how good they are, the truly agile teams are always focused on there are ways to improve, and they always want to do that. Now, from an agile mindset, because an agile mindset focuses on providing value, because agility focuses on responding to change and providing value for customers, is we often hear the question, should we be learning this now? I want to learn this. I think it's going to be great. It's going to be fun, but I don't know if it's the right time. Because if it's not, how much value are we going to provide to our customers? We also hear, how can we do this better? How can we get better at whatever we're doing, no matter how good we are? And, what can provide the most value now? What is it that we can do to help our customer now? And these are really some of the phrases that we use. And now one of the things I will point out is if you start using this language with yourself, you will see an improvement. If you start off every morning thinking about the new things that you can achieve, and if you start having this, changing your language with the teams and asking them if there's things that they can do, and working with other people and focusing on the value proposition and changing our language, we can change our mindset. It's very important. Now, through my studies of the language and mindset, I came to the conclusion, I realized that some people don't have an internal dialogue. I don't know about you, but when I listen to myself, I hear myself talk. I have an internal dialogue, and so I work on that, and I can change it. I can change my own attitude. But even if you don't have an internal dialogue, even if your mind is a little more silent than mine, and many people have, talk to your teams, talk to your leaders, talk to your coworkers, talk to your family, talk to your children. Encourage them that they can do better. Don't tell them they're smart or stupid. Tell them, you know what, you did great because you worked hard. You did great because you practiced. And also keep in mind, whatever mindset you're in today, it may be slightly different tomorrow. Check your language, check the way you're thinking, and just readjust to where you want to be. Don't get down on yourself if you're being glass half empty today, because tomorrow you have the opportunity to be glass half full again. Thanks. That's it.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was fantastic, really. Ken, do we have time for questions? Ken and Andrea?
Yeah, we have 3 minutes or 2 minutes and a half.
If anyone wants to ask Steve questions? See Anaga's hand raised.
Yes. So thank you very much for picking up really nice topic and starting with definition of Agile and mindset. And one thing so I was taking notes, and one of the first thing you mentioned was mental attitude. And when I checked the word attitude, it pointed to behavior and position of the body and implying action. And the example was uncooperative behavior, resentful manner. So, so that was one step down. Like, you know, if Agile is mindset and mindset is attitude, attitude is behavior, and behavior is action. So it comes down to body, and in a way, movement of the body in whichever way. And I think when people think about mindset, they forget about the body part, that all of us have body. And what we do is we move around like, you know, we are carrying our head from one place to another and only thinking and being intellectual. And we forget about our body, and we use body as a vehicle most of the time. And I think somewhere in that agile and movement, there is a body that's missing, I feel.
I'm sorry, is there a question I could answer, or is someone else?
Yes, yes. If you, well, there is no question, but I would love your comment or anyone else comment.
I think our body and breathing and stretching can do wonderful things, because if we open ourselves, if we open our bodies and we open our hearts, we automatically become more open and a little less fixed, right? So if we think about what we can do, and if we mimic certain feelings and emotions, and one of the things we often do with new Scrum teams is we tell them to go through Scrum and just go through the motions, and we'll figure out how to get through there later. So yes, practice being open. You can do that with your physical body as well, not just your language. That's a great point.
Can we relate this one to emotional intelligence?
Absolutely, because one of the things you're trying to do is you can understand where people are by the language that they tend to use, and often their body language as well. And if you can rephrase a lot of what they're saying back in a way that, one, does not, trigger any negative emotions, but comes back and increases the positive emotions and helps them go forward. One of the first times I was ever experiencing such language, this was back in the 90s. I'm an old guy, a lot older than I act. I act like a child. But there was a discussion at the boardroom, and it's like, oh, this is going to be really hard. This is going to be very difficult. And the owner, who had built, at that time it was about 140 people, a $10 million company, just looked over and said, "But does that mean we can't do it? Does that mean we shouldn't do it?" Just very calmly, and just shut down all the negativity there right away. And suddenly everybody just start feeling like, yes, we can do it. Maybe that's a great question. So yes.
And Steve, I'm not trying to make a question over here, but it's a comment about one thing that you said. You need to introspect, right? Agility is all about, once you're agile in yourself, and that's how you can only deliver agility to other people, or probably coach other people accordingly. So basically what I'm trying to say is, from your whole presentation, it was a lovely presentation. I really love that. That people need to actually go ahead and probably talk about changing themselves as well whenever it's required, changing in a positive way rather than a negative way, and then take it forward from there. And that's how they're going to be changing their surroundings as well, whether that's organization, whether they're, relationships, or whatever that is, And that was a lot.
Agility is all about improving and responding to change. And as soon as we think our journey's over, guess what? We're right back in that fixed mindset, and we have failed. So
yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay. Sometimes we just need to fall back in that fixed mindset for a while.
Absolutely. Not to being a stubborn guy, right? So, keep on changing.
Yeah, I catch myself all the time. I think, you know what? I've been in a pretty fixed mindset the past couple of weeks. Time to expand and go back to the growth.
It's like in a basketball team, like basketball game, one team starts scoring, other team starts watching, then the coach calls for timeout to regroup and rethink.
Yeah.
That's exactly it is. So
Absolutely. Change the mindset. And he's probably using language that the team isn't using out on the court. So anyway, thank you all so much for inviting me here. I look forward, I sent a bunch of you LinkedIn requests, and I'd love to, get in touch with you and stay in touch with all of you. Thank you, guys.
Sure. That's good.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much. A
Steve.
big round of applause for all the presenters, speakers today. You guys did a fantastic job and very interesting information. This video will be posted on YouTube, so you can see the recording. And please utilize the Slack group. It's a great networking tool, great way to introduce yourself. And if you feel comfortable, share your email in this chat. But Ken, Andrea, did I miss anything else? Or?
Yeah, just I want to say thank you to our speakers, Sheena, Ben, Prabhat, Fee, Anaga, Andrea, and Steve. Thank you so much for taking the time to organize and work with us on this. We really appreciate it. Without you folks, this couldn't have worked. So I also want to thank the organizers, right? Without you folks, it couldn't have worked well either. I want to talk about our next gathering, right? So Wednesday, July 27th at 6:30 p.m., we have the awesome Jessica Katz, who's going to be talking to us about conflict management, turning conflict into a tool for problem solving. So, I strongly recommend that if you've got the ability and time to do that, that you attend that session. I'm sure it will be awesome. So, yeah, anything else you wanted to add, Andrea, before we wrap up?
No, that's it.
Awesome. Thanks for emceeing as well, Namita. And everybody, enjoy your evening. Thank you and be well.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank
Bye all.
you.
Take it
Bye.
easy. Thank
You
you.
too.